Is drinking raw milk safe like RFK Jr. suggests? Can you reduce a glucose spike if you eat your food in, quote-unquote, the right order? I'm registered dietitian Abby Sharp. I host a nutrition myth-busting podcast called Bite Back with Abby Sharp, and those are just some of the questions I tackle with qualified experts on my show. There is so much food misinformation and disinformation out there, and it can feel impossible to know what's real and what's BS. On Bite Back, my goal is to help listeners create a pleasurable relationship with food, their body, and themselves, which in my opinion is the fundamental secret to good health. Listen to Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you a financial advisor considering the Independent Registered Investment Advisor, or RIA model, and wondering where to start? Start with Schwab Advisor Services. Schwab has helped thousands evaluate the full range of options and can help you determine your best path forward. Navigate the big and small decisions by tapping into Schwab's decades worth of insights on what fuels RIA success. With Schwab Advisor Services, you have a custodian that will support you every step of the way. Start your journey today at advisorservices.schwab.com/paths.
I know that you know the name of that song. So the only other thing you need to know is that it was on this day, June the 17th, back in 1978. 32, 25, 22, 25, 47 years ago. I'm like, wait a minute. It's not older than me. Not yet, anyway. 1978. You're the one that I want. John Travolta, Olivia Newton-John started a 9-week run at number 1 with You're the One That I Want on the UK singles chart. It was one of 2 singles, along, of course, with Hopelessly Devoted to You, that were written by Australian producer and musician John Farrar, specifically for Olivia Newton-John's appearance in the 1978 film version of the musical Grease. And that's how I knew that you knew already what song that was. You're the One That I Want, because Grease was such a monster movie. Good Tuesday morning. Thank you very much for stopping by, spending some of your time with us. My goodness gracious, do we have a lot, and I do mean a lot, to talk about today. This is going to be a jam-packed 4 hours, for sure. So I hope you're able to stay with us. I mean, as long as you, 4 hours, 4 minutes, 44 minutes, whatever it is. Glad that you pop in, pop out, stop by. My 9 a.m.ers, you early birds, love you long time and appreciate you being here. But we promise to make it worth your time today for sure. I just wanted to start with a quick note about the incredible people, really, that I got to spend my evening with yesterday. Some of the nicest folks, honest to goodness gracious. I was out at Rebel Creek Golf Club because it was the annual Upside Down Golf Tournament in support of the Waterloo Region Down Syndrome Society. And let me tell you, what a fine group of people that I got to spend the evening with. Had dinner, raised some money. More than $21,000 was raised by the time all was said and done. But truly, I was just overwhelmed by the kindness, which was topped off, if you can believe it, with me being made an honorary member of the Buddy Choir. If you have not had the privilege of seeing our local Buddy Choir perform in the past through the Down Syndrome Society, it is something to behold for sure. They are not only enthusiastic, but talented. And they called me up to help out with their big finale, which inevitably seems to be Sweet Caroline by Neil Diamond. We had a great time with it. But the best part is they made me, like with their own hands and their own talents, a dozen butter tarts. Somewhere, somehow along the way, I became known as Butter Tart Guy in these here parts. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I am. I mean, I don't know if I really need that many butter tarts. My doctor might say otherwise, but I'm good with it. I mean, I'm also thinking maybe I should start calling myself $1 Million Guy. And anyway, honestly, a dozen butter tarts worth $1 million or more to me. And it was fantastic. Really enjoyed it. Thank you for including me in your evening and being so kind to me. And yes, baking butter tarts. I did bring some to share with my colleagues here at the radio station today because I couldn't possibly. Could I possibly? Well, yes, I definitely could have possibly. In fact, I can assure you that not all of said butter tarts even made it home from Petersburg last night when I left Rebel Creek. But I thought, well, okay, I can share some with my friends here at the radio station. So I did that. But great night, great cause, great money raised. Thanks for including me in it. Let's get to your Farwell Show 5 for this Tuesday morning. Number 1, Kitchener is not yet ready to implement a renoviction bylaw. City staff has been asked to investigate further what such a bylaw would look like, how much time it would take from staff to manage, how much it would cost. Council has kicked the renoviction discussion further down the road before making a decision. Number 2, Waterloo is not yet ready to create an arts hub in a former church. The city announced earlier this year that it had purchased St. Columba Church at Lincoln and Mayfield with a plan to turn it into arts space for the next 3 years. We talked about it on the show yesterday. I thought this was kind of a fait accompli at the meeting last night, but no, the idea met some resistance at last night's meeting of Waterloo Council, some saying it would be too costly and the city might be better served fast-tracking the housing project planned for the site. The issue returns to council next week. Number 3 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, Cambridge is ready to host the region's biggest Canada Day bash. It's set for Riverside Park on July the 1st, and for the first time, the city is assuming management of the event. Festivities will start at 8 a.m. on Canada Day with a parade planned for 11. Fireworks will wrap things up later in the evening. Number 4 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, the G7 continues in Alberta for its second and final day. Now, though, without U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump says he left early due to escalating tensions in the Middle East, and he'll miss the day Prime Minister Mark Carney had scheduled to focus on foreign policy. Carney will hold bilateral talks with both Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the sidelines. And number 5 on your Farwell Show 5 today. Time is running out to get a ticket in the Kitchener Westmount Rotary Vacation Fantasy Lottery. Ticket packages start as little as $20, and a limited number of tickets are being sold. Top prize, an Asian temple tour worth more than $21,000. You can get tickets at KWVFL Vacation Fantasy Lottery, VFL, kwvfl.ca. Sales close tonight at 11:59 p.m. The draw happens tomorrow. And that is your Farwell Show 5 for this Tuesday morning. Something I heard during All News Mornings today with Christine Clark and Mark Douglas, our reporter Josh Piercy, following last evening's meeting of Kitchener Council, the discussions and delegations around renovictions and why some felt the city should implement a renoviction bylaw. And some of the language in that meeting and those reports from Josh Piercy really struck me. It's got me thinking. Your morning wake-up call and the language that really caught my ear this morning around renovictions and whether or not a city should be imposing regulations in this way. We'll talk about it coming up with your morning wake-up call on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. As we discussed on the show yesterday, it was an animated discussion, passionate discussion around renovictions at a committee meeting of Kitchener Council yesterday. We knew that there were protests and rallies planned at City Hall, outside City Hall, as that meeting approached yesterday. And this is a difficult issue. Let's be very clear right up front here. The practice of renovicting people from their apartment units, whereby you as the landlord come in, say that renovations need to be done, sometimes, in the case of a renoviction, in bad faith, right? You do that so that you can get them out and then try to bring them back in at a higher rental price because the market has changed. As we know, the market in the region has. If you were renting or you have been renting an apartment on a long-term basis, you are probably paying well below what the market currently bears for that apartment. And so unscrupulous landlords will try to find ways to get you out of there so they can rent at the current market rate and make more money. Not every landlord is unscrupulous. There's no question about that. But because we've seen this practice happen, we have seen efforts by some cities, London, Hamilton, nearby as examples, to combat these quote-unquote renovictions. When we talked about it on the show yesterday, I expressed some concern around jurisdiction and staying in one's governmental lane. Is it up to a municipality to do this when really landlord-tenant issues fall under the province's purview? That's why there's a Landlord-Tenant Act provincially. That's why the Landlord-Tenant Board, whether you like it or not, but the Landlord-Tenant Board is a provincial board. And staff at the City of Kitchener quite rightly pointed out that if there were to be a renoviction bylaw created in the City of Kitchener, it would need a dedicated team of staff, which means it's an ongoing cost to all of us as taxpayers. They could be taken away from other projects that need doing in the city, etc. And it's going to take about another year to put something in place. There's a lot of work to be done. Again, is it really the city's jurisdiction? But something that came up in the meeting from one of the advocates hoping that Kitchener would create a renoviction bylaw really struck my ears. Here's what I heard.
You have the legal and the moral authority to avoid discrimination, to demonstrate moral leadership, because we're talking about human beings and not buildings.
The moral authority. And this made me think, does a municipality, does any government, are they bound to legislate morality? Not to be too glib here, but I think that we got this big book about 2,000 years ago that started with the chapter of Genesis that did at least attempt to legislate some morality, right? And I will, if I may be so bold, to liken this to something that we talked about on the show last week. I was telling the story of the spandex warrior who was truly riding his bicycle very recklessly in a dangerous manner. And I said to you then that no amount of safe cycling infrastructure is going to save a person riding a bicycle like that from serious harm, because eventually they're going to make the dumb mistake because they're riding recklessly. They're going to get hurt. And yet we spend all this money creating all this infrastructure, essentially trying to protect people from the mistakes they make. I am convinced, and you'll have a hard time convincing me otherwise, that we need little more than that supercomputer between our ears to keep ourselves safe on the road. It's called our brain. If we use it, and we use it well, we're going to be okay out there. And you can build all the infrastructure you want. I'll come back to what's on the T-shirt. You can't fix stupid, right? And if you're going to do something stupid, you're going to get yourself hurt. In this case, when we talk about legislating morality, can you or will there always be people? I mean, I want to have the highest hopes for people. And I do. 85% of us, I say this often, really well-meaning, good people that want to do right by others and will do right by others every day. But can you legislate against the actions of that other 15 to 20% of people who will act in an unscrupulous way? And if you try to legislate against those folks, do you end up just going in a circle, spending money, creating false hope when the unscrupulous are going to be unscrupulous anyway? I got an email this morning from Chris to Mike at 570news.com, and I think this is an interesting perspective around renovictions and why it's such an issue in the community. But Chris writes, I also understand that sometimes there's another side to the story. I've been on both sides of the fence, and I'm currently a renter. When the average person becomes a landlord, it's generally as an investment in their future or maybe for their retirement to supplement their current income. My daughters are small-scale landlords who own a couple of properties in the area. They rent well below market value, but despite the allotted annual increases, the current rents are so low that, quite frankly, they often feel like they're paying people to live there, as the current rent does not cover the costs of running and maintaining the property. Remember, costs have gone up across the board. Having said that, renovictions are not always to raise rents, Chris's email continues. Over the years, my daughters have dealt with non-payment, severe damage, and filth to the point where they've had to hire someone with hazmat equipment to clean out the place, tenants who are violent and threatening, and everything in between. The system is flawed, and there's not an easy solution, as there are good tenants and good landlords who are tainted by those who are less ethical. And so we come back to that attempt to legislate morality, according to Chris, on either side of the tenant and landlord spectrum. It's a tough one. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I sometimes wonder if I'm the only one who does this. So I'm taking it to you to find out if I'm alone in this odd behavior or not. Maybe it's not as odd as I think it is, but here's what I do. And I should be clear up front. I don't do a whole lot around the house. But when I do things, I'm quite proud of myself for the things I've done, you know? So I do cut the grass at home, which I did yesterday after work. And every time I do this, every time I mow the lawn, I admire it like it's the greatest lawn that has ever been mowed. I'm not even making this up. I will make a point of, when I pass windows in the house that give me a good view of the lawn I just mowed, I will check out my lawn and admire it, how good it looks. What a great job that I just did cutting the lawn, even though, of course, it's the lawn mower that does the job, right? But am I the only one who does this? Do you also admire your work, however minimal it may be, once you've finished? I posted a picture that you can criticize or admire because I think it looks pretty damn good on our Facebook page this morning, facebook.com/The Mike Farwell Show. And you can let me know, am I the only one who does this? Or do you too take pride in that finished product of a well-manicured lawn? I know I do, and I even stare at it when I get a chance from a window inside the house. I'm going to get you to the 570 News Center for an update. And then intensifying tension in the Middle East between Israel and Iran. Is there any way to de-escalate? We'll talk about it coming up on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio.
Are you ready for more independence as a financial advisor? Consider the RIA model. Schwab Advisor Services has helped thousands of advisors make the move. To find your path, start with Schwab at advisorservices.schwab.com/paths today.
Tensions in the Middle East continue to escalate, and now we have an intensifying conflict between Iran and Israel. What to make of it all? We're going to get perspective on that with our next guest this morning. Anthony Seaboyer joins the show. Anthony is a national security analyst and professor of political science and political philosophy at Royal Military College of Canada. Anthony, good morning.
Good morning.
What is behind this latest conflict in Israel's strike against Iran?
Well, I think there are several factors. The main one that everybody's focused on is, of course, the Iranian nuclear program, which we've seen increasing data suggesting that they've made progress to a level that was more and more threatening of them actually having a nuclear weapon capability. So we don't know how true those reports are, but there are increasingly reports indicating that. On the other hand, there's other factors playing a role here for sure, because there are a lot of experts questioning the proportionality of the Israeli response. I think there's very few people that are unhappy about the Iranian nuclear program being struck and really pushed back years. That is certainly a good event. That's a good development. The question is, though, what about the other attacks, the level of attacks that we're seeing, the generals, military leadership being killed? These do not seem necessary to actually take out the nuclear program, and there is question about proportionality of the Israeli response.
Are you surprised at all about Iran's ability to respond in this?
What I'm surprised about is that the Iron Dome, which has functioned really well in the past, is obviously not sufficient at this point to take out large amounts of the Iranian missiles. We've seen even this last night, there were like around 20 missile attacks. 4 of them apparently got through. That surprises me. That Iran has strong capabilities to use missiles against Israel, we've seen for decades. I mean, they've been attacking directly and indirectly Israel for many years now. They have support, of course, from Russia, and to some extent likely also from China in terms of at least finances, if not even weapon systems. That's something we're looking more and more into, the actual level of Russian support that Iran's getting. What
role might the United States have in all of this?
Well, it's a very big question at this point. Under Trump, it's really not so clear. What's sure is that Israel's weapons, most or many of the very effective weapon systems Israel has, come from the United States. They're sold by the United States. And with that, there is some influence, at least has been influence in the past, on how these weapon systems are used. It's not clear what role Trump is trying to play. The latest comments we're hearing from him here are that he says it might be better to have a final solution than a ceasefire. But what would a final solution really look like? Because there is no military solution to a nuclear weapon program, for the simple reason the program doesn't just exist in facilities that you can target. It exists in the minds of scientists. It exists in documents where the research has been, written down. It's impossible really to bomb away a nuclear program. There will only be a diplomatic solution over time. So it's really not clear what Trump is leading to with a final solution there.
And who might then lead a diplomatic resolution here? Would that be NATO?
Well, we're seeing lots of different actors from Turkey over Russia suggesting to actually bring the players to the table to get a negotiating solution to this. I think still at this point, the United States would be the strongest and most effective actor in doing this. The European Union is also playing a very constructive role with France, Britain, and Germany trying to negotiate. But the strongest cards in terms of influence on Israel, certainly at this point, the United States still has.
Do you see a way forward towards de-escalation in the immediate term, Anthony?
I think the closest to where we can get there is, this is something Trump has also been saying, the nuclear program has clearly been set back years, if not longer. And the argument that's being made to Iran is that if this continues, whatever is remaining will also be destroyed. And to prevent that, the only way is really to come to the table and have a solution. That might be the short-term solution we're seeing as a possible outcome of this. But the question is, of course, has to be raised as well, what does Netanyahu really want here? What are his end goals here? As I said, there is no military solution to the program because the program is in the minds of the scientists that worked on it. He took out the lead scientist, but there are many, many scientists involved in this, and the documentation of how to develop this, the results they received in their research are documented, of course. So it's going to be hard to find a military solution there.
Obviously, here in Canada, we're quite concerned right now with the G7 meetings, which conclude today, but it's a busy day for our Prime Minister. What role, if any, might Canada be able to play in this?
Well, Canada's a middle power, and Canada has a strong track record through NATO and otherwise of supporting multilateral crisis solution mechanisms, which we know Trump is not a friend of, which is one of the reasons why he likely left early the G7 meeting. He believes in one-on-one negotiations and using his power unilaterally. But we as Canada need to work together on the level of NATO, with our partners, with United Nations to bring conflict resolutions, make conflict resolution possible. It's limited what we can do, but we can lead with an example of rule of law, of democratic values, and Canada has done that quite successfully over the years. But to be able to do that, we also have to step up militarily and have own military power to be able to defend ourselves better than we have in the past. And that's something I think I'm looking forward to. We're hearing more and more this government wanting to actually do that.
Anthony, I appreciate your time on our show today. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Anthony C. Boyer is a national security analyst and a professor in political science and political philosophy at Royal Military College of Canada. Offers his perspective and expertise on escalating tensions in the Middle East, now, of course, between Israel and Iran. The nuclear sites and some nuclear capability, no doubt crippled in all of this, but you can't, as you hear Anthony describe, eliminate one's nuclear arsenal strictly through a bombing campaign because it exists in the minds of scientists and elsewhere. And then, of course, there is the question again, and stop me if you've heard this one before, but the necessity of all of the force used by Israel in this regard. Yes, some targeted bombing, but what went beyond that? Was it an absolutely necessary use of force? We are in an increasingly conflicted world. We are far removed from it, I think, from here, but I don't know about you. Sometimes I follow the news and I wonder, first of all, what must it be like to be living in an area where this is much more the norm than, of course, we have here? And how does it impact us in this part of the world? Your thoughts always welcome on the Mike Farwell Show. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. Where do we find our place in this increasingly hostile world? This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
The question is, of course, has to be raised as well. What does Netanyahu really want here? What are his end goals here? As I said, there is no military solution to the program because the program is in the minds of the scientists that worked on it. He took out the lead scientist, but there are many, many scientists involved in this. And the documentation of how to develop this, the results they received in their research are documented, of course. So it's going to be hard to find a military solution there.
Anthony C. Boyer is a national security analyst and professor of political science and political philosophy at Royal Military College of Canada. Joins us this morning to talk about the escalating tensions in the Middle East, Israel, Iran, and whether or not it was a proportionate response on the part of Israel, which, as I said when we were speaking with Anthony earlier, stop me if you've heard this one before, because of course, we are now years into the Israel-Hamas conflict, and that same question has been asked since those October 7th terrorist attacks by Hamas. Was the response by Israel proportionate? But as you also heard in that clip, you cannot erase a nuclear threat militarily because it exists in the minds of the scientists and within the regime. 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. I find myself thinking back quite often now on a call we got on the show some weeks ago, but it was from a gentleman expressing his concern for our young people today, given all that they have or are currently either have had to deal with or are currently dealing with. You know, put aside for a moment the domestic problems with cost of living, etc., and consider global conflict and what we are seeing around the world and how that might impact the mental health more than anything of young people today. And I've always tried to put it into the perspective of, well, what was it like for us as kids? And I add the royal us, putting us in the same basket here as being of roughly the same vintage. But I was talking with my buddy about this the other night, and he said we have come through world wars before and somehow found a way to soldier on as people. I just find this to be increasingly concerning. I was actually watching a news report on the weekend where the reporter had to sign off suddenly because the air raid sirens began going off. I can't remember having seen that before, but it just made me think of what life must be like on the ground in Iran right now, in Israel, anywhere really in the Middle East where these conflicts are continuing to intensify. What's it like day-to-day life? I look at these pictures that we see through the television news feeds, and it just makes me wonder about the daily existence in that part of the world and longer term, what this all looks like. As you know, U.S. President Donald Trump is turning into somewhat of a central figure in all of this because in the span of roughly 8 hours, he went from suggesting that a nuclear deal with Iran remained an achievable outcome to urging Tehran's 9.5 million residents to flee for their lives. And what did that mean? Did that mean a ramping up of military efforts on the part of the U.S.? But this was all happening as Donald Trump cut short his visit to Kananaskis, Alberta, and the G7 summit so he could return to Washington for those urgent meetings with his national security team. So he intends on meeting with his advisors. In fact, he might be doing that right now in the Situation Room. And he appears to be building the public case for a more direct American role in this latest conflict. The shift in tone comes as the U.S. has repositioned its warships and military aircraft in the region to respond if the conflict between Israel and Iran further escalates. So again, Donald Trump becoming more of a central figure in all of this as we from afar continue to watch. And here at home, the G7 meetings will conclude, and Prime Minister Carney today is holding those discussions on foreign policy, expecting to hold bilateral talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. That's what's happening here while Trump goes back home, and is the U.S. building the case for greater military involvement. We continue to watch with interest. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Is U.S. President Donald Trump building the case for a more direct American role in the Israel-Iran conflict? It's an interesting question as he has fled early from the G7 meetings in Alberta. Let's go to the phones. I expected I would hear from this fellow today. Jersey Bill, good morning.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand why people are reluctant to talk about this. It's certainly a briar patch of a problem. But, I just feel that Trump has done the wrong thing again. This is a time when you talk to your closest allies, when you come up with a collective plan where you if he's going to put down tensions, this is another case where he alone is not going to do this. And unfortunately, that's not the way he sees the world. He sees the world transactionally. And I think in this case, if he can find a way to throw around enough money, people will come to an agreement. It's just not the way it's going to work. Not when you have these long-standing ideological differences and even differences of religion, which are at the root of what's causing this.
Why do you call this a briar patch, Billy?
Oh, well, actually, that's probably the wrong thing, because when the rabbit was thrown into the briar patch, that's where he lives.
That's right. Yeah.
But the thing, I was trying to think of a good analogy, but it's just a problem on top of a problem on top of a problem that unfortunately now goes back centuries, and some of the worst actors on both sides in this case are the ones that are pushing forward this military response, and they don't see any reason to stop. And as much as Trump wants to be the great peacemaker, if he keeps arming one side and saying the other side has to essentially unconditionally surrender, unless he's willing to put some of his own assets into that effort, he's not going to succeed.
Do you see a diplomatic solution, though?
Well, if one side really gets desperate, if they really feel that they have some sort of existential reason, and in this case it would be Iran. If Iran and the Ayatollahs feel that, we're going to have to change. I mean, they've suffered a lot of losses, mainly through the actions of the Israelis. They've lost a lot of allies out there now. If the real unfortunate thing is what if Russia or China decides, hey, we're going to back these people up because it's going to really affect Trump adversely and the Americans adversely. That'd be the only thing that would stand in their favor. But they've lost Hezbollah. Hamas is being decimated. They're the people that they depend on to carry forth their asymmetrical warfare just aren't there anymore. So, and now it's come to them. It's come home to them. And of course, as has been said, bombing people unfortunately gets them to support even the worst kind of regime because now they see their own lives tied up with that. But who knows how much longer this regime can last when it's only providing misery for its people and not any good solution for their lives.
Billy, appreciate the call and the perspective as a retired U.S. military man. Appreciate you weighing in today on what, as I said earlier, is an increasingly volatile and conflicted world. I'm sorry we don't have time to get to more calls before our 10 o'clock update. We're just about 30 seconds away. But a theme that's going to be running through the show today, stop me if you've heard this one before, housing. We'll talk at 11:30 this morning with Habitat for Humanity Waterloo Region about the need for greater density in our neighborhoods. And I wonder about something from Waterloo Council last night, if there's a sense of urgency in Waterloo to create that density. That'll be between 11:30 and noon. But right after this update from the 570 News Center, what about modular homes and their role in fixing what's wrong with housing right now? We'll talk about it on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio.
Are you ready for more independence as a financial advisor? Consider the RIA model. Schwab Advisor Services has helped thousands of advisors make the move. To find your path, start with Schwab at advisorservices.schwab.com/paths today.
Think of all the things that we own that have been made on an assembly line. Vehicles, of course, would first come to mind. Appliances, electronics. In some cases, they're not even touched by human hands anymore. It's all automated, baby. So if we're doing that with so many things, what about the idea of factory-built, modular, prefabricated homes? Are we ready to get there? Are we moving in that direction? Can our neighborhoods be filled with these prefabricated homes, factory built, getting them into the neighborhoods more quickly? Peter Haas is the general manager of Stellumar, which is a division under Mattamy Homes. They've tried this in the past, and it sounds like the idea is being resurrected as Peter joins the show for a conversation. Can we just start with, because I've heard a lot around modular homes, Peter, and some will describe them as these shipping containers or some such thing. But what does a modular home today look like?
Yeah, so it is still going to look like a home that you would see today. It's just the construction method changes. So essentially, you're moving stuff that would be created within or created in the field on the job site to being created in the factory setting.
Now, we know that this kind of home building has been tried in the past with varying degrees of success. What makes you think that the market is ready for more homes like this?
It's really the technology. It's advanced quite a bit in the last few years and even the last decade or so, both from a machinery perspective and from a software perspective on how we can actually model homes in 3D, for example.
So how does that technology then improve outcomes? Are we talking less expensive? Is it more realistic as a business model? Probably both?
Yeah, it's both. So I'll give you an example. About 25 years ago, Peter Gilgan, one of the key investors and founder of Mattamy, started a business called Stellumar also. And they had over 50 people doing kind of the modeling on what a building would look like and putting that building into 3D. And we can now do that with a software program instead. So there's a lot of cost savings there. The equipment is also more automated, more accurate than it was. So it's actually a higher quality product that the end customer will get as well, which means that the end product should be cheaper than what people would have been able to get, call it 15, 20 years ago.
How much of this home, Peter, is built in the factory, and how much work is done or needed to be done on site?
The short answer is it depends. So we're looking at doing different types of prefabrication or modular. The first one is prefabricating walls and floor panels. So that means instead of stick framing a home in the field, which takes 6 weeks, we can stick frame it with the prefabricated walls and floors, and that takes 1 day. And then that essentially looks like everything still needs to be done. The walls are still open. They still need to be drywalled. The roof still needs to go on. So that's one element of doing modular. The other element is volumetric, and that kind of looks like Lego blocks being stitched together on the job site. And those are pretty complete homes on the inside. And those get stitched together, and then it's really just completing the outside and putting the roof on and doing some finishing touches on the inside that needs to be done.
I've heard some folks refer to modular homes and maybe even the modular home industry as something that creates shipping containers or cargo containers. If I'm walking down a street, would I be able to determine which home was a modular home and which one was not?
No, you definitely would not be able to. The shipping containers are people who are trying to build things that are super standardized and super cheap and super quick. That is not at all what we're trying to do. On the prefabricated walls and floors, it'll be just like any other home, just likely a bit higher quality. And then on the volumetric modules, you wouldn't be able to tell at all. You can change the facades on the outside. So a home in one area can look completely different from the one in another area.
What kind of home buyer do you suspect would be attracted to this particular home in our market?
I think all home buyers, but where we're starting in the first product that we're doing on the volumetric modules, so the Lego style modules, is a 6-story, 47-unit building. And it's going to predominantly be very livable 2 to 3 bedroom units meant for families. So we're really trying to solve that missing middle product that hasn't been being produced in the GTA in the last 15 years to the degree that it needs to be. So that's where we're starting.
Missing middle is certainly something we hear an awful lot about in cities when we talk about housing. And one of the other things we hear is that there is a lot of regulation and there are a lot of costs associated with the home building industry. How do you bridge that divide, Peter? Is this a lower cost way of doing this? Is there a way to get around some of the regulations that we've been told are holding up home building?
So we're fundamentally going after the construction problem, not as much on the regulation side. So prefab enables you to build stuff quicker, and time is obviously money, and we should be able to do it for cheaper as well. So we're really concentrating on how we can enable builders to build quicker, and that should lead to more affordable products for customers.
So how much quicker would it be than the average home, do you anticipate?
So on the low-rise setting, where it's the prefabricated walls and floors, we can frame a home in 1 day versus 6 weeks. And then on the 6-story product that we're working on, we think we can have it finished in less than 6 months compared to as much as 3 years in a regular kind of condo development.
Where will the product be available?
We're working on a bunch of different sites right now, so no announcements on that side, but everything we're currently working on will be kind of in the GTA area.
And how confident are you as you're, starting this back up after having taken a crack at it a couple of decades ago? How confident are you that the market is ready for this?
We're super confident. There was no issue with the market needing anything before, or the market not accepting it before, and customers are screaming at us with joy and telling us all about how they want this product. It's more on the execution side that we need to do, and with the technology that we have today, we think we can do it.
Peter, really appreciate your time on the show today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Peter Haas is the general manager of Stellumar under the banner of Mattamy Homes, which about 20 years ago tried this very thing. And to say it didn't take, I think would be fair. A subdivision in Milton was where it was, I guess, piloted, and it never got beyond that initial subdivision. But now, with improvements in technology, they feel like the market is absolutely ready for more of these homes. And what we're talking about here, as you heard towards the end of that conversation with Peter Haas, is a project. They're starting with this 6-story missing middle kind of apartment condo development. And he says 6 months to get it done, as opposed to the 3 years that it can currently take using, let's say, traditional practices. What do you think? Are you ready for modular homes to be a part of our residential market? 519-570-2545. Star 570, 1-800-570-5715. Are we moving towards something that will help to solve the problems we're having in housing? Your thoughts always welcome on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
We're fundamentally going after the construction problem, not as much on the regulation side. So prefab enables you to build stuff quicker, and time is obviously money, and we should be able to do it for cheaper as well. So we're really concentrating on how we can enable builders to build quicker, and that should lead to more affordable products for customers.
Prefabricated, factory-built modular homes. Peter Haas is the general manager of Stellumar, which is exceedingly confident that the market is ready for these modular homes. Let's go to the phones. Doug, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. A true modular house is built in a factory using specialized equipment in a controlled environment where a house can be built 24/7, 365. When it arrives on site, generally speaking, the interior is complete. That means kitchen cupboards are installed, plumbing fixtures are installed, drywall's on the walls. The roof is likely, because of the pitch, likely laid down flat.
Have an opinion? Call now.
Hello?
Sorry about that, Doug. You're good.
Okay, so, and they use a crane to stand the roof up. Now, I've built myself 5 modular houses as personal residences. The largest I built was a 3,000 square foot bungalow that consisted of 8 modules. They started setting the modules on the foundation at 8:30 in the morning, and at 3:30 in the afternoon, they were on their way back to Ottawa. And that's right. That house was shipped from Ottawa on the back of 4 trucks, lifted by crane, set on the foundation, and I never had one problem. No drywall cracks, nothing. That house, once it was set on the foundation, we finished the interior, which is basically the electrical has to be hooked up. It's already wired behind the walls. It's dropped down below floor where the electrical panel will be located, and the plumber has to come in and hook it all up and plug it in. Plumbing has to be done below floor. That means all the plumbing above floor, fixtures, etc., is installed, and pipes and water lines are dropped down below floor so that they can be hooked up. Heating and air conditioning has to be completely installed on site. That 3,000 square foot bungalow was set on the foundation, and I moved into it 21 days later. And the only thing that was not done on it was the brickwork on the outside.
All right, Doug, it's a good testament to what can be done. And I want to move on to some other calls, the next of which comes from the Mayor of Cambridge, Jan Liggett. Mayor Jan, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, thank you.
Okay, that's great. I love this concept of, well, it's not even a concept. They're actually building prefab homes. And we have a manufacturer here in Cambridge, and I had the opportunity to tour that factory 3 years ago. They're extremely well built, high quality, and I think the market is finally ready for it. We at the City of Cambridge are ready for it. We have been for quite a while, and I've had a few of the manufacturers come to see me, but nobody has come forward with any plans. So they need builders, they need property. I think that this will be the clean air that we need in a community, rather than the tumultuous public meetings where nobody wants something next to them. I think that the height, 4 to 6 stories, is brilliant. It can fit into any community. And my only caveat is that they don't build something that looks like a military barracks, because they can go that way. There are people who build them in other provinces where they look magnificent, and you'll get the buy-in from the public if you build it in that way. I'm open for it. I think it's an incredible idea.
Based on what you saw at the producer in Cambridge, Mayor Jan, are you confident that they can create the sort of modular home, the modular dwelling that will look aesthetically appealing, fit into those neighborhoods?
Absolutely. It's, Mike, if you ever get the opportunity, please take a tour through that facility. If you want, you can email me and I'll give you the connection to that, so that you're able to talk about it and how it's all done. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant how they do the work.
Appreciate you calling in today, Mayor Jan. Travel safe.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the call. Jan Liggett, Mayor of Cambridge, clearly on the road, but says her city's ready for this and believes the market is too. Paul, I've got you on the line. We'll get to your call next, and there's a line for you too if you want to talk about modular homes and whether or not our market is ready for more of them. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Our conversation this morning around modular homes and whether or not our communities and you, perhaps as a potential home owner, are ready for them. Let's get back to the phones. Paul has been patiently waiting. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning. Listen, take 2 lots side by side, put a foundation on each one, because even for a modular home, there has to be some prep done to the property. You can't just set it in the ground and hope it doesn't sink in. So you've got two foundations side by side. Then you go ahead, you do a conventional home built on the one foundation. It takes a while to build it and everything else. When it's all finished, it's a nice-looking home, and it has a certain market value. Now, you take a prefab home, which is built cheaper and more economically in a factory, and it is dropped onto that lot. It is pretty much the same style of a house, maybe the same amenities and whatnot, except it was built in a factory instead, where it was built a lot cheaper. Now, you're going to sell each of these homes. What's the value on each home? Are you there?
I'm thinking, and so I'm guessing that your assertion here is that they will be priced the same because they're in the same market.
They will be priced the same. They'll be priced at market pricing.
Okay.
So the only thing that happens is that the prefab home one has a much higher profit margin in it. Do you know of any...
So wait, just hang on. So are you saying that we're not ready for modular homes, or what we're doing is simply lining the pockets of the builders of the homes.
Do you have any ideas as to any individuals that may be involved in the modular home business, may have investments in it, or may run an investment company, Brookfield Assets Management or something that builds modular homes? All that ends up being is the profit is just transferred.
So you don't
instead of paying skilled labor or skilled construction workers and whatnot, union rates to build this home, they're going to have it on a mass assembly line, paying minimum wage or thereabouts. Therefore,
so you don't
increasing the profitability.
Right, but you don't think
Brookfield Assets Management,
okay,
which of course we all know is controlled. But no, Mark Carney doesn't know what goes on inside of Brookfield Assets.
Hang on, Paul.
Management.
I'm running out of time. I want to make sure I get your point here, and I think I do. This will not bring down the cost of housing, in your opinion.
Not at all.
Okay.
It just increases the profits for the builder.
I got it. We got to get to the news center for an update. And then let's talk about online safety for our kids. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
Are you ready for more independence as a financial advisor? Consider the RIA model. Schwab Advisor Services has helped thousands of advisors make the move. To find your path, start with Schwab at advisorservices.schwab.com/paths today.
Can I play old guy in the room here for a minute? Would that be okay with you? Would you be too upset if I did? I would love to know from you what you have done in the past or are doing currently to limit the amount of screen time your kids get and or keep them safe from any harms they may encounter online. 519-570-2545. Star 570, 1-800-570-5715. I thought maybe we could share some successful tips and or tricks with one another because I worry as the old guy, and again, if you've got a tip you want to share, 519-570-2545. Star 570, 1-800-570-5715. Those tips and tricks that help limit the screen time that our kids have. As the old guy in the room, I'll remind you that, of course, I didn't grow up with a screen in the palm of my hand for my entire life. There was concern, and I remember this, and you might too if you're of a certain vintage at or near mine. You know, oh my gosh, spending too much time in front of that television set. Gonna rot your brain. But of course, Saturday morning cartoons had quite the draw, didn't they? And we did have the good old-fashioned Atari 2600 video game system introduced into our home, which was another reason just to sit there and interact with the screen. And there was concern associated with that as well. We seemed to have managed, but even then, my parents put some controls around it. You get an hour of video games. You get this much TV time. Did I ignore those guidelines? Heck yes, I did. Not all the time, but enough of the time. However, there were also those other times where the message simply was, go outside. It's a nice day. Don't waste it sitting in here in front of the screen. We know that, of course, today, the screens are far more ubiquitous. They are everywhere. Kids have computers at their fingertips all the time, to the point that we have now, I think, to some degree, passed off the responsibility to our education system. Because, as you know, There were new rules in this province, in this community, and elsewhere across the country around cell phones, not just even in classrooms, but in schools. And I read an interesting, so not just in an individual classroom, but in the school generally. Thou shalt not use one's cell phone. And what we ended up hearing from a report I read just yesterday is that these initiatives have met with a reasonable amount of success across the country. In the jurisdictions where cell phone bans or cell phone limits have been implemented, there is not only less screen time, obviously, there is greater social interaction between students because they're not just staring at their screens. One teacher reported how quiet it had been in a workshop classroom group setting. And she realized that it was because everybody was just staring at a screen. So if we take the screen away, they can then have a conversation with one another. So the social interaction improved, and the moods and or behaviors of the children also improved because they weren't distracted by or stressed out by their screens, what they were doing with those screens, what they were using those phones for. So I feel as though, I mean, it's one school year's worth of data. I don't think there was any in-depth scientific research to determine the effectiveness of these various bans on cell phones in schools, etc. But at least anecdotally, we're meeting with some moderate success here, right? And I wonder why that was pushed off onto our educators and our education system when we seem incapable of doing it at home or wanting to take the initiative to do it at home. It's a difficult thing, I understand. Again, going back to those days as the kid who had the video game system, who had the cartoons he wanted to watch, who had the parents saying, stay away from that screen. Too much screen time is not a good thing. But there were fewer screens. There were fewer of those distractions. So this is what we had then. And now, of course, we've got a completely different set of circumstances. And so it becomes a real challenge in the home, especially as we're now heading into our summer holiday period, because you're going to have the kids who I'm sure you want to be outdoors, who you want to see socializing in real life with other human beings as opposed to interacting on those screens. And this is just scratching the surface, of course, to all of the mental health problems that we have seen related to the use of screens and the ubiquitous nature of them. I'll remind you that Waterloo MPP Catherine Fife is working to get this recognized at our provincial legislature to let's deal with the mental health impacts that these screens and the screen time is having on our kids. Hopefully, we can have a summer full of outdoor play, enjoying playgrounds, enjoying the friends in our neighborhood, and less time spent online. We're going to take a break. When we come back, if you were to hazard a guess, how many parking tickets do you think a city gives out in 1 year? And connected to what we were just talking about, being connected, socially connected. How important is that for our overall health and well-being? Because I think you, like me, have probably heard in the past that loneliness is actually detrimental to our health, but a new bit of research from the University of Waterloo seems to turn that on its ear. We'll talk about it coming up on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Okay, did you think about a number? How big a number did you think about when it comes to the number of parking tickets that a city might issue in a given year? The city in question is the city of Kitchener. And I'll get to that story and information in a moment. How many parking tickets did the city of Kitchener hand out last year? And how many might it hand out this year, which I think is pertinent to the story as well. I also, though, wanted to share this with you because you've probably heard before, I know I had, that loneliness is actually detrimental to our health. In fact, the U.S. Surgeon General warned as recently as last year that loneliness is as harmful to one's health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Kind of connected to our previous conversation. If you are of a certain age, you would have grown up in an era whereby you would knock on the neighbor's door or go down the street and meet your friends in person to go out and play. I think it's kind of just hardwired into us that being around people and socializing with people is what we do, as opposed to socializing with or through an electronic device. So I never worried about a time where I wasn't social anymore. But I guess as you age and friendships change and you might move away, or people, unfortunately, after time, there is an inevitability associated with the end of one's life. It happens. And you might find yourself lonelier. And when I heard warnings like that from the U.S. Surgeon General, that being lonely was as harmful to our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, I just recommitted in my mind that I'm going to be that guy. You've probably seen that guy at your local coffee shop around the table with the other guys and gals, just talking about the issues of the day over a cup of coffee in the morning. I call it the Cranky Old Persons Club, and I use the term with endearment because I plan to be a member, so please leave me a seat at the coffee table someday. Wouldn't you know, though, that despite hearing all of that concern around loneliness and its impact on our health, a new study led by researchers at the University of Waterloo has found that while loneliness is common among older adults, it's not associated with an increased risk of death. The findings from the researchers at the University of Waterloo suggest that loneliness may not independently increase the risk of death after you control for other health risk factors in older adults. And this, of course, contradicts much of the existing literature based on the general population. Loneliness remains a serious threat to psychological well-being, but loneliness does not kill you. Good to know, although I would still recommend. I mean, I'm still asking for that seat at the cranky old person's table. I would love to be included in that so I can continue to socialize with my fellow human beings in my later years. And believe it or not, I'm not yet in the later years. I'm in the twilight, just the twilight of a mediocre career. All right. Did you come up with a number? How many parking tickets do you think the city of Kitchener issued last year? The number, my good friend, is 60,000. 60,000 parking tickets. And the city is on track right now, issuing 30% more than last year. So it will issue almost 80,000 parking tickets this year. To what do we attribute the increase? Technology, artificial intelligence, but this is the kind of stuff I can kind of get behind. In fact, Kitchener is a nation leader in this particular respect. The only municipality in the country, or at least the first in the country, I'm not sure if others have adopted it yet, but Kitchener has essentially piloted this to make it an out-of-the-box solution for any other municipality. It equips vehicles. There are 2 in operation in the city of Kitchener with a bunch of cameras, automated photographic and license plate reading technology. And these vehicles can be driven by a bylaw officer through the city, and it can measure down to within 1 centimeter of accuracy whether or not that vehicle is parked illegally. For example, if you are parked too close to the end of a driveway or too close to a fire hydrant, and you know the rules and they're stipulated in a city's bylaws, these cameras, this technology will identify within 1 centimeter if you were too close to that particular fire hydrant, that no parking zone, that driveway, whatever the case may be. And these vehicles have been put to good use in the city. As I said, so far this year, leading to an increase in 30% of parking tickets issued. They get used often in school zones. If you've listened to this show for more than a minute, you probably have heard me complain before about all of the infractions you see every day, twice a day in every school zone. Drop-off time in the morning, pick-up time in the afternoon. People park wherever the HE double hockey sticks they please. Because, I'm only going to be here for a moment, and my kid's just going to come right. I got to be in the most convenient spot to pick up my kid. I don't care if I'm blocking that fire hydrant or that driveway or if I'm in that no parking zone. And of course, you can imagine that this leads to confrontation between bylaw officers and illegally parked vehicles, the drivers in those vehicles. We told you the story just last week about the incident in Guelph where I guess a couple of parents got into a spat over parking and one headbutted the other. So thanks to this technology where the bylaw officer merely has to drive through the neighborhood and the pictures get snapped of the illegally parked vehicles, there is no confrontation. And then you just get a ticket in the mail. And because of the accuracy of those photographs and that technology, it's very difficult to fight the ticket. There's the picture of your car in front of the no parking sign. Here is your ticket. Please pay your associated fine. That's the kind of technology that the city of Kitchener is putting to use. I don't think they're going to catch everybody because you can't be in every school zone every day, twice a day. But the city is at least working in that direction. And they say compliance has improved dramatically since the automated tickets started being issued. Interesting, that. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Just a few minutes away from our update in the 570 News Center. Let's go to the phones. We love hearing from you, interacting with you on the show. Mike is with us. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Michael. I'm going to talk about the loneliness thing. I live now in Point Clark, and there's some old age nursing homes around where my dog, Ravioli, and I go and visit once in a while. So what we usually do is stop off at the local Timmy's, get 20 Timbits and a carafe of coffee, and Rafi and I go, he's on the Paw Patrol, and we go and visit these seniors, and some of them don't get visitors for months, right? And there's a group of volunteers like us that do this, right? And I think it's well appreciated that we do come with our dogs and stuff like that and hand out Timbits and coffee to these seniors who are infirmed and in homes and stuff like that. So I think it's important. Once I just retired in February, I think it's important you start volunteering a bit and you start visiting some of find a charity or some thing you care about to make someone's life a little bit more happier by going and visiting them. And some of these guys are perfect strangers to me. Now, Mike, about the coffee club.
I want to be in the coffee club.
Okay. You know where Amberley is, right?
Of course I do.
86,
Absolutely.
21 there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a country-style donut shop, and we meet each morning at 6:30 a.m. I know that may be a little... And at 3 p.m. and at 9 a.m., and there's a whole bunch of mixture of people, retirees, farmers, and everything else.
I want to be in the 6:30 coffee club, Mike. Get me into that thing.
Yeah, well, we meet and we solve all the world's problems at that time, right?
Good. Save me a seat at the table.
I brought my 87-year-old mother to that thing, and she said, Michael, that's not the coffee club, that's the BS club. So you're invited to the BS club, Mike.
All right, Mike, I got to get to the news center, but that's fine. Please save me a seat at the BS club. I want to BS with you at 6:30 in the morning. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio.
Are you ready for more independence as a financial advisor? Consider the RIA model. Schwab Advisor Services has helped thousands of advisors make the move. To find your path, start with Schwab at advisorservices.schwab.com/paths today.
If I were to tell you that mothers in this country have been losing their jobs during pregnancy in recent years, would that surprise you? I mean, what did we do? Turn back the clock 60 or 70 years? It's 2025, for crying out loud. Getting pregnant and having a baby is not grounds for dismissal from one's work, is it? Well, the data seems to be indicating otherwise. Deborah Hudson is a labor and employment lawyer, joins us to talk about this. And Deborah, let's start with how you were led to uncover this data. I mean, was there any indication of a problem initially that led to the subsequent research?
Absolutely. So I've worked closely with this Moms at Work group since around 2020, and we really felt anecdotally that there seems to be a lot of women being terminated at the back end of their maternity leave and other sort of issues cropping up. And we felt this was happening anecdotally and happening so much, but we never had the numbers. So we wanted to get the numbers. So, from there, that's why we engaged to undertake this study.
Okay, so what do those numbers then look like?
The numbers are quite shocking for 2025, but one of the most shocking numbers was 15% of the survey participants were terminated on returning from maternity leave.
What would you like people who find themselves in that unenviable position to know from an employment perspective? What should these people know?
So what is important to know is it's not necessarily illegal to terminate someone returning from maternity leave or any other protected leave under the Human Rights Code, but it cannot be linked to the fact that they took a leave. So I'll give you an example, and this is the same sort of speech I give clients when I do a consultation. If, the company has shut down completely or your department has shut down completely and you're terminated, it's clearly not linked to the fact you took a leave. Everybody in your position lost their job or in your department lost the job. But if it's any way linked, then it would be considered discriminatory, and they can be entitled to extra damages and extra notice. So what I would say is it's important to get legal advice in these circumstances.
Is there any indication in what you've learned through your polling that there is something untoward going on here and that these terminations are in fact illegal?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So often, the example that I give and I probe is if they replace the person going on leave with somebody else and that person is still in the role, but so they keep the replacement and then they terminate the person coming back from leave, then that definitely looks like discrimination. And that happens a lot. It comes up a lot anecdotally. And, there's certain circumstances like that certainly coming up with the survey participants.
What are the broader implications of what we have learned here, Deborah? I mean, I can think of, parents not taking as much time off for a leave when they have a child, maybe deciding not to have children for fear of impact on one's career, that sort of thing. But what are the broader implications for us here?
One thing that's really problematic is that when people go on leave, they take their employment insurance. And then if they get terminated at the back end of their leave, they no longer have insurable hours. So they cannot tap into that employment insurance again. So that's a big problem that comes up. Sure, it makes people nervous about taking leave or wanting to go back early. And it's just bad for families and our overall, well-being in the community. It's a very, expensive time once you have kids, and it's very hard to get into daycare. That's another thing I see. People, secured daycare spots and they're expensive and then they've lost their job. So these are the types of issues that people face.
So you mentioned at the outset that we were kind of hearing anecdotal stories. You want to back up these anecdotes with some data. You've undertaken the research to provide that data. Now that we know this, what do we do?
I'm hopeful that some of the coverage on this educates employers and small businesses, because it's not always that people don't want to do the right thing. They just may not understand. And, when that's not the case and it's a flagrant breach of the law, I hope that we see some of these parents come and lawyer up and try to fight for their rights and, to secure their rights, which unfortunately, unless you're unionized, is mostly just trying to negotiate, greater financial damages. But, it's something that, that can be done and we can help with, because it's a high-risk termination.
Clearly, there is a moral case to be made here, but I can't help but wonder, too, if from the employer's perspective, there's not also a business case for maintaining an existing employee without going through all of the hassle of rehiring and retraining.
Absolutely. Like, attrition is expensive and keeping good people is important. And, for people to feel safe in the working environment, to know that if they need to take a medical leave or, parental leave or whatever type of leave, that they're safe and they're protected, all of that ultimately will, gain productivity. And, legal liability and legal actions and lawsuits, they suck. Lawyers are overpriced. I always see that. And it takes, right? Right? So it takes up so much time and money for everyone. It's not just stressful for the employee, but the employer has to, use a lot of resources to defend a lawsuit. So it's not good for everybody. And, a productive, safe working environment ultimately is better in the long run, if you look at big picture rather than just little picture.
Deborah, I appreciate your work on this and the time you've given us on the show today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Deborah Hudson is a labor and employment lawyer whose firm dug into the data, conducted the research that now shows what anecdotally appeared to be happening, and that is Canadian mothers are losing their jobs during pregnancy of late. And that obviously raises antennae and causes concern. After all, this isn't the 1960s anymore. It's certainly not the 1960s here in the region of Waterloo. Well, the region wasn't even around in the 1960s. It was only formed as a regional municipality in the early 1970s. But my point in referencing history and all those years ago is that we were a much smaller place then than we are now. And we are headed towards a population, we are told, of 1 million people in the next 25 years or so. The question is, are we ready for 1 million people? A just-released scorecard aims to determine if we are on the right path, and we'll talk about it coming up on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. The population in Waterloo Region right now is about 700,000 people. We'll add about 40+% to that population in the next 25 to 30 years. 1 million people will call this region home, we are told, in and around 2051. And of course, it begs the question, will we be ready for that? Ian McLean is the president and CEO of the Greater KW Chamber of Commerce, a member or a part of Best WR Business and Economic Support Team of Waterloo Region, joins the show. Ian, good morning.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
It's an absolute pleasure. I was really interested when I saw the Vision 1 Million scorecard that was just released this morning. What is it? Why is it out there?
Yeah, no, it's an important way for the community to start the discussion, because the vision of us being a place to grow started 20-odd years ago, dating back to the McGuinty days in the province. We've established we were a place to grow. So the vision of 1 million has been set. The real question that we're asking today is, are we ready? And Best Waterloo, as you know, the two chambers, Communitech, Waterloo Economic Development Corporation, and Explore Waterloo, met almost daily for 2 or 3 years during COVID to do things not only for business but on behalf of the community. And coming out of the COVID experience as we were opening up, we had identified that there were some gaps, and we needed to be more focused on how we were going to grow to be successful. And so we've been talking for a number of probably close to 18 months. I've done a series at the Chamber of Commerce around Vision 1 Million. Are we ready? Talking about some of the main things: housing, healthcare, transit, to name just a few, jobs. And so the plan that we have presented, or not the plan, but I guess the scorecard of, we are going to be 1 million people. Are we ready? And it focuses on 4 or 5 key things. Will we have the housing? Will we have the transportation infrastructure? Will we have the healthcare we need and the employment and jobs? And so,
this is really to make sure that we have one plan, one agenda, that everyone's on the same page, from the business community, the broader community, the federal government, the provincial government, the region, and the local governments, because we all need to be on the same page. As you pointed out in the off the top, there's going to be 300,000 new residents or something close to that by 2050. Some of us think it's going to be before then, but either way, it's a big number. And I guess that's the question: is, are we going to be ready for that type of population growth? Are we, so that we can be successful? And that's a successful community worth living in. Those are the real questions that we need to answer. And so, part of this is just an exercise of saying every 6 months we need to, as a community, take stock and say, where are we making progress? Where do we need to, redouble our efforts? Because one thing that is true is it's not just saying, well, if we build the hospital, we'll be okay. Or if we build 70,000 housing units, we'll be okay. We have to do a number of things at the same time. Build a new hospital, get family physicians, build 70,000 housing units, make sure that we're creating the environment where we can have 100,000 new jobs. That's what it's going to require if we're going to grow to 1 million people. And so these are big questions. There's no one organization, one level of government that does it on their own. It's going to take a community effort. And so for us, it's really a question about saying, this is one plan, one agenda, hold ourselves accountable, because there's nothing that Waterloo Region can't do when we put our minds to it. We just have to get coordinated and focused.
There's no one entity that will assume responsibility for all of this. So that makes me curious as to where this scorecard lands, Ian. I mean, you're doing this in partnership with the Future Cities Institute at the University of Waterloo. Mm-hmm. Best WR that you've already highlighted here. The scorecard comes out every 6 months, but then what's the call to action, I guess, if there is one, every 6 months when the scorecard comes out?
Well, look, when we talk about housing, there's shared responsibility. So, local planning. There'll be funding needs potentially from the provincial government. So, I mean, when you look at the scorecard, it's really just about saying who is responsible for what and what progress are we making. And this is the exercise of saying it is really to hold us collectively accountable for the fact that there will be. I guess the one thing that only one thing I'm absolutely convinced about is that we will be between 900,000 and 1 million people in 20 to 25 years. That much is true. The real question is, are we going to be ready for it? And so we have to hold ourselves accountable to say, how are we doing on housing? How are we doing on getting that new hospital built? What does that mean for healthcare professionals and the provision of healthcare here in Waterloo Region? How are we creating the 100,000 new jobs so that people have employment and we create the economic wealth and prosperity that the region, that we've enjoyed over the past. So it is really to say it is a community scorecard. That's why we're proud to be partnering with the Future Cities Initiative at the University of Waterloo to kind of make sure that the numbers are there, that we're seeing what the progress is, and that we can, in real time, start to look at where we need to put more focus, where we need to make sure we're making more progress. Because it seems like, I guess when you think about it, I mean, I guess I'm getting old, but 20 years doesn't seem like that far down the road anymore, right? And we've got lots to do. Think about just the top things that we as a community know we have to do. We have to finish the LRT. We have to build a brand new hospital. We have to build something in the order of 70,000 housing units, and not one at a time, all at the same time, if we're gonna meet our goals and objectives to be a successful community.
It's a great point, and I look forward to what progress we can make now that we've got this scorecard that will be coming out twice per year. Ian, really appreciate your time on the show this morning. Thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure, Mike, and I'll come back every 6 months and give you the scorecard update.
It's a date. You got it. Thanks again.
Thanks so much, my friend.
Ian McLean, President, CEO of the Greater KW Chamber of Commerce, along with his colleagues at the Cambridge Chamber, Communitech, the Economic Development Corporation of Waterloo Region, Future Cities Institute, the University of Waterloo. The scorecard comes out determining, are we 1 million ready? And it will look at housing, transportation, healthcare, employment and jobs and placemaking and livability. And I love what Ian said there towards the end. When you think about the big projects that are either in the planning stages or maybe in progress, we're going to build 70,000 homes. We're going to finish light rail transit, phase 2 to Cambridge. We're going to build that big new hospital out on the grounds of the University of Waterloo, and we're going to do it all concurrently. Not one, then the next, but this is all happening, and the scorecard will endeavor to keep us on track with that. Related, I couldn't help but notice the story today in the Waterloo Region Record by Jeff Uthit, who loves to dig into the data. And if we are to build those 70,000 homes by 2031, we should be building across the 3 cities, not counting the townships, across the 3 cities, we should be building 583 homes each and every month. Last month, in the region of Waterloo, in the 3 cities, Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge, we started 39. We're supposed to be doing 583 per month. Last month, we did 39. I would say on the scorecard, that puts us well behind. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Well, it turns out I'm not the only one. I brought this up near the beginning of the show today, and I wondered, because I feel a little bit weird about it, but when I finish cutting the grass at home, which is one of the few things I do around our house, but when I finish, I admire it like it's the best cut lawn, not just in the city, not just in the region, but probably anywhere in Canada. Nobody has a nicer lawn than the lawn that I just finished cutting, to the point where I'll be walking around inside the house and I'll take every opportunity to find a window that looks out onto the lawn so I can admire it even more from inside looking out. I shared a picture on our Facebook page today, facebook.com/The Mike Farwell Show. And clearly I am not alone. You also take pride in a job well done. But could you do me a favor? Could you just get off my case about the lack of whippersnipping/trimming? I mow. I don't whippersnip, okay? I can't stand the whippersnipper. Like, it's my least favorite of... Fine, I'll get out the whippersnipper. Clearly the job's... Look at the grass in the picture, okay? It looks beautiful. Forget the mess around the edges. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio.
Are you ready for more independence as a financial advisor? Are you ready for more growth and control over your future? The Independent Registered Investment Advisor, or RIA, model might be right for you. There are many paths to independence, and Schwab Advisor Services has helped thousands of advisors make the move with confidence. From defining your vision to successfully transitioning your clients, Schwab helps you build your roadmap to independence. To find your path, start with Schwab Advisor Services at advisorservices.schwab.com/paths today.
Today is Tuesday, and it just so happens to be the 3rd Tuesday of the month of June. And on the 3rd Tuesday of every month at this time, we like to put the focus on housing. If you listen to this show for more than a minute, you know that housing comes up frequently, but we dedicate space to it every month without fail. And to help us fill this space, we get some excellent insight from our friends at Habitat for Humanity Waterloo Region. Philip Mills is the CEO there and joins us for this conversation again this morning. Good morning, Phil.
Good morning.
I think I have just one question to start today. Did we just become best friends, Philip Mills?
I certainly hope so.
Oh, I think so. I really do. I was hopeful beforehand. I'm feeling more confident now because I have just learned that you, like me, really enjoy the letters to the editor section of the newspaper. And that, my friend, makes us best friends. We're besties.
Absolutely. I'm in. It took no convincing at all. No, I read them every day.
I do
They're
too.
the best part of the newspaper. It's like, I say to folks, it's like local social media. These are the posts that would have been on, what Facebook would have been 10 years ago when it was just people that you knew. Like, this is everybody commenting. What is actually happening in our community right here, right now? I love how absolutely grounded in this place they are.
I could not agree more. In fact, I have told the youngins that come through radio broadcasting now, and particularly news radio, I say, read the op-ed pages. You're going to find ideas. You're going to learn what's making the pulse in the community beat right now, etc. And so, because of our mutual love of the op-ed pages, the letters to the editor, something caught your attention when you were reading that page the other day.
It did. And it was, in some respects, I'm sad that it wasn't surprising. But there was this piece in there that had the duality that happens in all or so many of our conversations about housing. This person talking about, hey, I want to see a housing, a solution to the housing crisis. And then this big but, and it's always around density. We can't have more. We don't want more houses here. We can't have, this type of housing. We need, this idea that there is a solution to housing, but it can't be density. And I find it just so fascinating, this sort of juxtaposition, because I think people want a solution to housing. And you start talking about, well, one of the solutions to housing is going to be more houses. Their back gets up and they're like, no, we can't have density. We couldn't do more of that. And so it creates this funny problem where we're all agreed this problem needs to be solved, but can't get anywhere near behind a common solution.
So how do we go about then, Phil, overcoming this problem? Because I agree with your premise. I think we do. People in this community want a meaningful solution to what's been described as a crisis in housing. So how do we achieve something that works?
I think some of this starts with our own opinions. I think a lot of us are carrying a lot more of a bias and a presupposition about what housing is supposed to be than we really think we are. We just think housing is housing. But when you start kind of listening to people more and more and hearing what they're talking about, all housing is not made equal in their mind. The idea of that, well, I don't want that type of housing, or that's not the type of housing that a family has. It's not for real families. That only works for those people. And we start to put these really odd and at times, terrible labels on certain types of housing, as though there is only one appropriate type. And that appropriate type for most folks is still that standalone single family dwelling. If it's not that, it's not really a home. It's not really a house. That's not what we're actually wanting. What we want, everybody, is, suburban neighborhoods. And that's what we're supposed to want, because density is bad. It's not where a family ought to live. That's not what kids should grow up in. Kids need a backyard. Kids need, a driveway. They need things like that, or families need those things. That's what a real family has, not these other things. And that idea permeates then to how we actually think about our community developing.
I think on this, Phil, and it's really, in the grand scheme of things, relatively recent for me that I came to understand that a home is absolutely just that place that has the door that you enter through and the walls and around you and the roof above you and not much more than that. And that's because I grew up in a neighborhood full of single family detached dwellings with driveways and garages and yards with playground, the little swing sets and stuff in them. And then when I think about what I consumed in pop culture, the TV shows that I watched. I mean, heck, the one TV show I remember with an apartment was a penthouse. That's where Willis and Arnold lived with Mr. Drummond on Different Strokes, for crying out loud. There were, that sort of thing. So there's a lot then for us to, I guess, accept or redefine when it comes to a neighborhood or a home.
Absolutely. There's this idea, and I just think it's in us and we don't think about it as much. It's not that there is this dream of a white picket fence, but the expectation that that's what it ought to be. And I think that sort of space, that this is what a home is supposed to be, is colored by media, is colored by our history, is colored by where we live, like Waterloo Region, right here. It's a different place than it was. The idea of that white picket fence was something that was far more attainable quite, a number of years ago, but we still carry that with us moving forward now and start to see these things. But we're not the only place. There are lots of places that have for a very long time had great community, inclusive spaces, healthy neighborhoods that were not organized around single family dwellings, even to the extent that you go into older neighborhoods and see low-rise apartments, you see townhouses, you see that has always been there. But in our minds, so many of us would say that's not what it's supposed to be. And that gets in the way of us creating the community that we need, because we need more housing. Every time you're in the newspaper reading, every time I see, a report that talks about density, it's so often this, we don't want more density. It's like, but density is houses. Density is homes. And every time we say we don't want more density, we're saying we don't want more places for people to live, which I don't think is what we actually want. We want places for people to live. But we push back against this idea of density. We push back against these notions of what a home is supposed to be, while ignoring that people have been living and making homes in different ways than we have here for quite a long time, and it's been successful. And we need to learn from other places. How do you make a strong community? How do you make an inclusive space? How do you make the community that we need to support the amount of housing that we need in smart and intelligent ways? But that's going to have to include density. It can't just be, what if we push our boundaries further and further and make more single family dwellings, as if we can afford those anyway? Like, so many of these houses are already out of reach. We're like, well, we just built more of them. They're not gonna, you can't do that enough to get to what we need here. What we need is to understand that housing in a home is so much more than what we have been kind of conditioned to believe it ought be, and help people find spaces that work with the realities of the life as it is today. There just isn't the opportunity that there once was.
What sorts of communities are you creating or homes are you building at Habitat for Humanity today? And what's the response to them been?
Well, and that's, I guess, where some of my thoughts on this stuff, it's why it stood out to me when I saw this op-ed. We're building stacked townhouses in Shawns Hill. They're over 1,000 square feet. This is, like you would think of a wartime bungalow sort of space, like from a square footage standpoint. And we have people saying, look, I need affordable housing, but this isn't I can't do this. I need 2 parking spaces. That's going to be most important. My kids need a backyard. We're like, but this is close to park. This is close to a park. Riverside Park is right down the street from there. There's massive amenities. There's lots of opportunity. And you are in need of housing. Like, this is where, we can create opportunity for people. But that idea that this is not how a kid's supposed to grow up, this is not what a home really is, has gotten, I think, in the way of us being able to find practical solutions to the reality we're facing, which is we don't have space to go out forever. We can't just keep pushing the boundaries. We need to go up. We need more density if we're going to continue to have the opportunities for housing here that we need. And so how do we start to hopefully have people change their opinions about that, realizing this? And a part of that is that stigma. Like, if you're a parent and your kid says, hey, I'm going to, move, my partner and our kids into a stacked townhouse, does that parent say, good, I'm glad that you have housing? Or they're like, that's not where our kid's supposed to grow up. Like, how much of this is even in the way we interact with each other, making it harder and harder for people to access the solutions that are there, because we carry these, stigmas and biases and these assumptions on what a home is supposed to be.
So how do we go about then the process of changing those opinions or perceptions? Conversations like this, I would hope, are helpful, but I think there's a lot of work to do then, maybe on the part of municipal governments and elsewhere, frankly.
Well, I think, municipal governments are doing what they can to try and create, zoning opportunities for this. What we really need is, us to reflect. When we talk about us as a community, how do we anticipate we're getting there? I think we allow ourselves to hold these 2 ideas in tension without actually trying to come to a solution. We absolutely need more housing, and it can't be dense. Okay, then what is your answer here? Like, what do you actually want? Like, well, I don't know. I'm not an expert. Okay, but the experts are saying density. The experts are saying we need to build more housing. We need to build in different ways than we have historically to create, and meet the demand. And if that's not the solution that you want, what is? And I think we let ourselves off the hook by just being a little bit too difficult about it. It's like, well, I don't know a lot about housing, but I know it can't be that, but we certainly need more. Well, that's not an answer. And I think we can't allow ourselves as a community and as, as a region to let that stand, to let that be an okay answer. We have to push for something more than that, because that's not going to get us out of this crisis.
Phil, I always appreciate the conversations. Thanks again for being here today.
Thanks as always, Mike. I appreciate it.
Philip Mills is the CEO of Habitat for Humanity Waterloo Region. He joins us on the 3rd Tuesday of every month at 11:30 to talk about housing. And wouldn't you know, it's almost as though it was lifted right from the pages of that op-ed or that letter to the editor that Phil wrote that prompted this conversation today. A neighborhood says, yeah, we need more housing. I understand the need for more housing, but that in this location doesn't work. And this came to roost to some degree at Waterloo Council last night. We'll get into that right after this on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. A little bit of conflict, I would say, at Waterloo Council last night over how the city moves forward with housing in a neighborhood. I think it's Lincoln Heights. I'm not so good with I think that's Lincoln Heights. Anyway, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But Steve has been waiting on the phone, so we'll talk to Steve as well. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning. So like I say, I've been listening to your show for I don't know how long, but the word affordable housing has been kicked around for I can't even remember how long that is. But I think today was the first day I've actually heard anybody try and describe what affordable housing is. And I think that's the problem with affordable housing is we like to throw that term around because it sounds so great, but nobody can actually define what it is. And more importantly, I think we need to sit down and effectively communicate how affordable housing is going to be lucrative for developers. Because if there's no money in it, it won't happen unless the government gets involved.
Well, I was just going to say that. What if the government were to get back involved in that space?
Well, that's the only way it's going to work. Problem is our government, and it doesn't matter what stripe, everything they manage seems to not work. So, I mean, you're going to have some kind of government involvement, but you're going to need some actual, realistic oversight. So, yeah, it was entertaining listening to somebody actually throw around and try and pitch a good description of what affordable housing is. And the reality is, it's not going to have all the amenities. It's not going to have everything you want. It's not going to be a dream home. It's what you can afford and it's what can put you up. But at the end of the day, with the average westernized belief of what a home is, it'll never be affordable.
Yeah, you know what, Steve? I appreciate that call. And you're right. And I was going to say, because you talk about the dream home, I think it's a redefining of what the dream is. As I said, I grew up in a single-family detached home in a neighborhood full of exactly homes that were exactly the same. So that's the only perspective I ever had. But I've come to look at it a little bit differently. And granted, I live in a wartime bungalow myself, a detached home, big backyard, goes on and on. But that's not the only way to define a dream home. A dream home might simply be, hey, I was couch surfing or I was in a shelter space and now I have my own space with a lock on the door that's mine and everything within the walls. My possessions are there. They're mine. And maybe that's dream enough for some, many, I don't know. And as for the definition of affordability, we've gone back and forth on this quite a bit. But currently, the working definition of affordable is something that does not consume more than 30% of your income. If more than 30% of your income is being spent on housing, shelter, etc., it is not affordable. So where that becomes kind of means or income tested for everybody, because it's different, right? If you're making $50,000 a year, then anything more than $15,000-ish spent on the housing part or the shelter part is too much. Let me take you to Waterloo Council last night, if I can, because this is connected. And we talked about it on the show yesterday. And I honestly thought this was just going to be a rubber stamp at Waterloo Council last night. And boy, was I wrong. So, as you may recall, earlier this year, the city of Waterloo purchased for just under $3 million St. Columba Church at Lincoln and Mayfield in Waterloo. I have long believed, and I gave City of Waterloo credit on this. I still think it was a great idea. If a church is no longer going to be functioning as that, I think we have a lot of big buildings on a lot of big pieces of property that could be converted to a lot of housing all around the community. And I'm not trying to be anti-religion or anti-church. It's just the reality is declining membership and need for one building and the property that could be used for something we really do need in housing. So St. Columba Church, Lincoln and Mayfield, decommissioning as a church, and the City of Waterloo buys it, $2.9 million. The long-term plan is to build housing on the site, but in the near term, for the next 3 years, it would be used as a community hub, arts space, etc. So I thought that's coming to Waterloo Council for a rubber stamp last night. Turns out it was anything but rubber stamped. Councillor Diane Freeman raised a seemingly new concern around this use for St. Columba Church, using it for 3 years as an arts space, for example.
Today, we've heard a lot of information with regard to budget pressures that are coming up for this year and next that are quite significant. This is a piece that will require budget to fund. It'll require upwards of $500,000, and the renovation of the space will actually cost more money than if we just rented the equivalent space in a commercial area. And then we could advance the other plans for this property.
Advance the other plans for this property, which is housing ultimately. But neighbors in the Lincoln Mayfield area of Waterloo are saying, hey, we want to have a role to play in how you advance those plans. We live in the neighborhood. We want to have a voice in reshaping it. Councillor Royce Bodley had this to say.
I'm not really sure what we are deferring this for. Back in February, Council unanimously approved the following: a $2.9 million land acquisition, confirmation that we would do the capital improvements on the site, solid and complete and well thought through funding sources for the purchase of the property, the interim use, and the capital improvements. And we also approved a temporary use for up to 3 years for this art space. During that meeting, I do not recall any questions about zoning, about funding, about any of this, frankly. The deferral does not make sense in my mind, because what is before us today is a thoughtful staff report that's well researched with a trusted and reliable partner in Arts Build Ontario who has a proven model in the community. And that's what we should be asking ourselves if we want to defer. Otherwise, in my mind, we should be reconsidering that decision from February. And it's also particularly frustrating in my mind to have significant community support come out here and speak to why this project is so important, and then say, yeah, thanks, come back next week.
Next week is when Waterloo Council will consider again the idea of creating the community hub and arts space in St. Columba for now, before advancing the next priority for the land, which is building housing. But the question here remains, after what happened last night at Waterloo Council, is it housing at all costs and advancing as quickly as possible? Or does a neighborhood get to have a say in its own future? This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. We are going to send you to the 570 News Center for an update, and then your Talkback Hour begins. And I have a question for you, because there seems to be different ways of doing something, and I wonder which way of doing it you prefer. I'll lay out the scenario for you, and then you can tell me which way you prefer. Coming up on Talkback on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get no spending cash. If you don't scrub that kitchen floor, you ain't gonna rock and roll no more. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
Just finish cleaning up your room. Let's see that dust fly with that broom. Get all that garbage out of sight, or you don't go out Friday night. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
How about this from Ontario Premier Doug Ford? Says 4, quote, thugs wearing masks tried to steal a vehicle from his Etobicoke home overnight. That's related to the question that I'd like to ask you as we get into Talkback today. But a couple of people already on the line. And listen, I like it to be about you. You've got ideas, you've got thoughts, you've got things that are chafing your chaps. I want to hear from you, give you the chance to have your say. I've told you before that when we have conversations on this show, folks who have influence over decisions are often paying attention. And earlier today, when we were talking about modular homes, we got a call from none other than the Mayor of Cambridge, Jan Liggett, who happen to be listening to the show. So if you want to have your voice heard, it's a good place to do it. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. Dave, start us off. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. I'd like to give you a very quick shout-out to Summer McIntosh. Have a great day, Mike.
Thanks, Dave. Swimmer extraordinaire and the pride of Canadian pools. Well done, sir. Tom, good afternoon.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
I'm watching this G7, and the biggest problem Canada is facing is the fires. They have planes in Saskatchewan that you don't have pilots, and then they want to spend $100 billion on the military, which nobody.
Wait, who's spending $100 billion on the military?
Yeah.
Who?
Well, Canada. That's
$9 billion.
No. It's they were putting out costs. You got to have a hangar. You got to have people to run it. You got to train the pilots, and nobody's going up. So I'm worried about the Canadian that is burning, and they're doing anything about it.
Okay, listen, Tom, you've been beating that drum consistently, and I admire the persistence on that front. Tom believes the biggest problem we face, forget stimulating the economy, forget reinventing it with reducing interprovincial trade barriers, forget the threat of our closest neighbor, the United States, all of those different things. The biggest threat we are facing is wildfires. Fair enough. Mayor Jake, good afternoon.
Mike, how are you now?
I'm good. And you?
Oh, not so bad. With all this conflict going on in the Middle East, it kind of makes me think of the 9/11 days. And I was only 5 years old when the U.S. decided to declare war on Iraq and Afghanistan. And my dad sitting me and my brother down and kind of explaining, what was happening. And now that I have a son who's 3 years old, I don't have to sit there and explain to you he's 3 years old. But, I feel like that at that time when I was born, SARS was a thing. And then the war happens, and it's like COVID happens, and then this war happens. And as parents, I feel like there's no manual to sit your child down and explain to them what's happening, because you see everything on social media and on TV. It's really hard to grasp and to explain to them, like, hey, this is what's happening. And I want to tell all the parents, just reassure your kids that everything's going to be okay, and tell them that you love them, and make sure that they feel safe.
Great message, Mayor Jake. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Good to hear from you. You know what? I couldn't have said it better myself. Just love them, hug them, let them know that you're there for them. I was thinking about that too when we talked about it on the show earlier today. What a world we are living in today, and how wonderful to be in this little insulated part of it, eh? Jody, you're on Talkback. Good afternoon. Hi.
I just recently heard that since they got rid of the carbon incentive payment for ODSP clients, I just heard they're coming out with a carbon rebate now. And so I'm not going to be as much in the hole as I thought I'd be. So I'm excited about that, and I'm glad summer's just around the corner, and I'm looking forward to some long walks and late nights, and I hope everybody has a good time this summer.
All right, Jody, appreciate the call, and Jody has made no bones about the fact when she has called in at past times that she lives on a lower income, so this latest rebate that she will be getting is going to help make ends meet just a little bit more. And you can say summer's around the corner all you want. The way I feel it these days, we are actually very much into summer, at least weather-wise. But yes, we don't officially reach summer in terms of the calendar and the solstice until, I believe it's Friday is when it's going to officially arrive. But nonetheless, it feels like it, and I have been loving every bit of this beautiful weather lately. Kyle, good afternoon.
I would just like to compliment you on your lines on your lawn, my friend.
Thank you. They're not bad, eh? I noticed a couple of little spots I could have been better, but I appreciate that, Kyle. And yours, too, look exceptional.
I tried. You know what? I switched over to a new lawnmower this year. I'm doing things kind of old school. I got a real lawnmower.
What do you mean a real lawnmower? What'd you have before? A pair of scissors?
Well, no, I had the ones that people usually have are a rotary one where it spins around, the blades, and they spin really, really fast. And the ones that they use in the golf course and stuff, they use a real lawnmower. Like the old school ones are like a pair of scissors. You know how they you have to cut them like almost like 3 times a week just to.
I gotcha. Yep.
Yeah. So I got one of those, and it does really well. It's just you just got to be careful because if it does get too long, you're out there for quite a while trying to get through it and stuff. But I thought I'd be like one of those guys that just take care of their lawn really, really well and things like that. So yeah, I enjoy it. So I just wanted to compliment you on your beautiful lawn, and if I was there, I would cheers a beer with you like a good neighbor and say, we did a good job.
Thanks.
Have a good day, my friend.
You too, Kyle. I appreciate it. I just wondered if I was the only one, so I posted a picture on our Facebook page today of my finished lawn from yesterday when I had a chance to get out and cut. And every time I finish, I'm always just admiring it, thinking it's the greatest cut lawn in the world, and I'm the greatest lawnmower ever to push a lawnmower. And clearly, I'm not alone in that. You can see the picture for yourself if you want. Facebook.com/The Mike Farwell Show and weigh in there or during Talkback. I know I'm not the only one. I admire that lawn every chance I get until it's time for the next cut. I have a question for you, and I will ask it right after this. Do you want it done this way or the way they're doing it over there? I'll tell you what it's all about coming up on The Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Clearly, you have much on your mind today. So right back to the phones we go. I love to hear it. Luke, you're next. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Pretty good.
Good.
Pretty good. I wanted to chat about a problem neighbor experience, if that's okay.
Sure.
I have a neighbor. I'd say it's more of a harassing kind of neighbor, but he's called police on us for shoveling snow on his front lawn. But we were on vacation in Europe, and we came back and found right beside, we live downtown Kitchener, right down the property line beside the house and in front of the house, a fence was erected directly on the property line. And we called bylaw to talk about this. And even though there's laws listed on the bylaw page about fences, there's nothing they can do about it. They say it's a civil matter. So I don't know if anyone has been in this experience before, but if we want to have anything done about this fence that's directly on the property line, we have to get a lawyer, which costs a significant amount of money. Reason why it's a concern for us, we have 2 little kids, car seats, and we cannot get in and out of our cars anymore. And it's, I don't know if any viewers have suggestions on things that we could do.
That is interesting. I'm not positive, Luke, but if you did have to take this to court and you were ultimately the successful, you win the case, wouldn't they maybe have to pay the damages and pay your court costs? I don't know.
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay.
But if we lose...
Yeah. Then you're... Interesting.
That's my dilemma.
I get you. Okay, well, sorry to hear it. And if we can get any insight on that, we'll be happy to pass it along.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the call, Luke. Again, I'm sorry. Come on with your coming on. Didn't I? We talked about this at the beginning of the show with the city of Kitchener and the moral responsibility that one of the delegates at council last night said Kitchener Council had to protect tenants. So now we're legislating morality, and this just gets murky, doesn't it? Because there are going to be people who sadly operate in an immoral manner, and whether that's in the landlord-tenant space or any other space. The bottom line is, can we just stop? Can we not be dinks? If we could do that, that would be a wonderful thing. Maybe we should use this show as a platform to not be a dink any longer. What do you think? If it makes you feel any better, Luke, I've long ago, the person that owned the house that I now own before I owned it, he and his neighbor did not get along either. And the fence that I affectionately refer to as the spite fence still runs the length of the driveway. Fortunately, it doesn't impede any getting in or getting out of the vehicle because we've got the other side and whatnot. But it's always been a nuisance to me. And it was done because the neighbors couldn't get along back then. The old spite fence. So I hope you can get your spite fence solved. Glenn, good afternoon.
Mike, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I was listening to your segment on reno evictions, and this is in the provincial matter, but one of the issues we have a major affordability emergency, and a big portion of society just can't go from paying $800 to $2,000 in rent. That's just the reality. I don't know why people put their heads around this one.
Well, I guess what I would ask you, because I don't, you're absolutely right. But my question then would be, is it the landlord's responsibility to ensure that you have the $800 place to live?
No, I don't believe so. From
Right.
the perspective that many of these buildings that are being renovated, and sure, some people are shady, but many of these 30, 40-year-old buildings need to be renovated. But, it's not a question of if. But I do believe it's on the other side of the ledger with salaries. Even the governor of Bank of Canada says the salaries are too low in Canada. People can't afford their rent.
Yeah, it's true. And we, what is it, 18 years, I believe, is the number in this community for house prices to remain stagnant and salaries to increase. That's how long it would take for salaries to catch up to affordability.
Well, if you look, I bought my first house for $33,000. It's just gone way off the hook, and I feel bad for our young people. I really do. And it's not a question of excuses. It's a question of that the hill may be too high for some people right now.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, Glenn. Couldn't agree more.
Anyways, have a nice day.
You too. Thanks for the call. And those renovations, by the way, just to get back to what Glenn was saying, that may need to be done on a decades-old building, they ain't getting done any cheaper today than they were yesterday, are they? It's a really tough spot. We certainly have to support those who are on lower incomes and struggling with affordability. Does that support, though, come directly from the person renting out the unit? Don't know. Rent supplements? We're getting back into provincial territory here. This is the Mike Farwell Show, your Talkback Hour, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. The Talkback Hour is your chance to do just that. Let's talk. You can talk back to us. Terry, good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, Mike. Wow, Mayor Jake's just a young buck. He was 5 years old during the 9/11 thing. I thought he was a much older gentleman.
He's got an old soul, Terry, and he's a smart guy for his years, eh? Terry, where'd you go? Terry, where'd you go? Why you gotta be that way, Terry? Just disappeared like that. Fell right off a cliff. Anyway, I also did the math. Sounds like Mayor Jake is just about 30 years old and a smart fella for his age. Bob, good afternoon.
Hey, Mike. Excuse me. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you, sir. How are you?
All right.
Good.
Well, I don't know if you remember or not, but remember after the election I said Pierre Poilievre's going to be replaced?
Yeah, I think I do remember you saying that.
I was watching either Question Period or one of the news shows on Sunday, and he said that the Conservatives' numbers are still falling, and his numbers are falling more than the Conservatives.
Pierre Poilievre's own numbers are falling faster or further than the Conservative Party's numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it's under review.
Yeah. And
I know it's part of their policy is to have a leadership review. And if he is replaced, I got a funny feeling it's going to be Doug Ford, because he's well known across Canada and he's known down in the States.
So you're already signing the death certificate for one Mr. Pierre Poilievre as Conservative leader?
Yeah, because near the end of the election, he was even showing in the commercials. It was Stephen Harper they were showing.
Yes, they were. It's true.
And when Paul phones in, Tom, I said, hi. Have a good day, Mike.
All right, Bob. I will. I hope you have a good day, too. It is interesting. It reminds me of what's interesting is being the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada lately. It reminds me, if you'll forgive the reference, but of the TV sitcom WKRP in Cincinnati. And the program director of that radio station, basically the person who runs the radio station, WKRP, was frequently being fired because the owner, Mama Carlson, always wanted something different. And so one of the employees gets named the new program director, and the other long-standing employee says, hey, what about me? Well, you can be program director when he's done being program director, because you see, the program director keeps getting fired. Kind of like Conservative Party leaders in this country. I am not yet ready to sign the death certificate that Bob is already signing for Pierre Poilievre, but it was as much as the Conservatives as a party lifted their numbers and got more votes than even Justin Trudeau the last time he won to form government in Canada. Pierre Poilievre lost his seat, and according to Bob, the numbers continue to go in the wrong direction for Mr. Poilievre. We shall see what the review has in store. Talkback continues on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I want to get back to this next call quickly because last time his phone just fell off a cliff and I don't want it to happen again. Hello, Terry.
Hey, Mike, you know what? They can put men on the moon, but they can't get a decent cell service, I'm telling you. No, I think I was in a bad cell area, so... Yeah, I was cut off. I didn't know if you were pissed off at me or if...
No, you didn't even fade out. You just disappeared. Gone.
Yeah, I'm trying to say hello, and there was nothing, so I figured, oh, well, it must be a bad cell area. But anyway, I was going to tell you about that, about the guy that called in about the fence.
Yeah.
I think it is definitely a civil matter. I know this because growing up, my old man used to fight with every neighbor that we lived at. So the thing is it's best to talk to the neighbor to get a certain boundary put up. Or if you're going to put one up yourself, put it within a foot of your.
But the fence is already up, Terry. So you're not helping.
The problem with that now is if he doesn't go sue civilly or go take it to court, it is a civil matter, definitely. After a certain amount of time, I don't know what the time limit is. I know there is a time limit depending on which jurisdiction it's at. Eventually, that becomes permanent. So after a certain amount of time, you won't be able to do anything about that. So it's best to get on it right away. My suggestion is to him is to just go see a lawyer and get it civilly set, because he could probably get compensation from the neighbor, because the longer you wait, it's not going to be too well on his side. Anyway, Mike, thanks for taking my call again. I apologize.
Not your fault, but thanks for calling back. It was good to hear from you, because it didn't even fade out. It just disappeared. The other thing you could consider doing, Luke, who called earlier about that fence problem. The fence was put up while you were away vacationing in Europe. Maybe when your neighbor goes away on vacation, you could defence. You see what I mean? You see what I did there? You could defence and then make them sue you. That's not, come on. Let's just talk to our neighbor and see if we can sort this out. All right. There's a question I've been meaning to ask you, but our phones have been busy, and that's okay. I love to hear from you and the different directions that our conversations take. But this is something that has been on my mind. It just was almost like a throwaway sentence in the middle of an article I read today, and it got me thinking. So if I can take you back to the story of Udo Hahn here in Kitchener. Do you remember that? This goes back about 7 years, but the name is not a common name, so it might stand out to you. And it might sound at some points like a little bit of revisionist history, but I promise you this is exactly the way it played out. My beloved would attest to it if you were in the house and you heard me say what I said. So you go back to the story of Udo Hahn here in Kitchener in 2018, where he was found guilty of fatally strangling his wife and then trying to cover it up by opening a gas line in the basement and blowing up the house on Sprucedale Crescent. Ultimately, he was found not criminally responsible and sentenced to detention in a forensic hospital near London 7 years ago, right? Not criminally responsible, so you spend your time in this psychiatric hospital. But after all those years, eventually you are out of the hospital, living in an apartment in St. Thomas. You're still under a detention order and under supervision of the hospital, but you're living on your own. And the story pops up that Udo Hahn was interested in a long-term relationship. He was seeking a romantic partner, so he had engaged in such activities as speed dating. Now, this is where I promise you is how it played out. When I heard this, I said to my beloved, how is this a good idea? How is this even a thing that somebody that was found, yes, not criminally responsible, I'll grant you, but of strangling his wife and blowing up their house is in the course of his detention and being under supervision of a psychiatric hospital is allowed to, while living in that apartment, speed date because he wants to find a romantic partner? Like, I don't even know how that's a thing. Criminally responsible or not criminally responsible, if you're found guilty of killing your wife, I would think that maybe you forego any romantic relationships for the rest of your days. Somebody's got to at least be given a heads up on this. Nonetheless, speed dating it is, or should I say was, for Udo Hahn, because shockingly, it didn't turn out all that well. And now Udo Hahn has been arrested again for what? Harassing a woman he met while speed dating. Tell me that you also could not foresee this outcome. Like, it stuns me to some degree. It really does. Criminally responsible or not criminally responsible, guilty of killing wife, and then while living near London in an apartment outside of the psychiatric hospital, despite the supervision, you're allowed to speed date. And there's going to be a good outcome for that? Clearly not. Harassing the woman he met while speed dating, and now arrested again. Now they try to figure out, well, what do we do? Do we keep him in the apartment? Do we put him back in the Southwest Center for Forensic Mental Health? I'm kind of astounded by this. I'll add to that what we just learned earlier today, and that is that 6 of the 9 men arrested here in the province in the largest drug seizure in Peel Region history, a multi-million-dollar cocaine bust. One of the men arrested from Cambridge, in fact. 6 of the 9 who were arrested have now been released on bail, with conditions, but released on bail. So engage in activity, multi-million-dollar drug bust. Now you're out on bail with conditions. Udo Hahn, not criminally responsible of killing wife, but still guilty of the crime. And then off to St. Thomas, lives in an apartment, speed dates, and gets arrested again for harassing somebody that he had been speed dating, or who he had met while speed dating. So there's a couple of examples nearby to us right here in the region. And then this little throwaway, perhaps. In the middle of an article I was reading this morning about the man who's been arrested and charged with killing 2 Democratic politicians in Minnesota State. He has been charged with murder and stalking, which could result in a death sentence if convicted. That's Minnesota. Murder and stalking, if you get convicted, it's a death sentence. In Canada, not criminally responsible, go speed date, harass a woman you meet while speed dating. You see where I'm going with this? Largest drug seizure in Peel Region history, out on bail days later, with conditions, but still out on bail. Murder, stalking, could face death penalty. My question to you is simple. Do you have a preference here as to how these things are being treated and or handled? I'm curious about that. I'm curious about a lot of things in relation to these cases, but this specifically, let me know what your preference is. It's Talkback on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Get found not criminally responsible for killing your wife, and several years later, engage in speed dating. Be a part of a bust for the largest drug seizure in Peel Region history. Days later, out on bail. That's here in Ontario, or even right here in Kitchener. In Minnesota, meantime, get charged with murder and stalking, and a conviction could bring a death sentence. That's a dramatic difference, and I wonder if you prefer one option over the other. 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. George, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. I hope Liberal Bob is still listening. This is all on the Liberals. 6 out of the 9 men released. That's called, what do they call that? Catch and release, whatever.
Yeah, we do call it that. You're right.
And also, Udo Han killed his wife. Who's running the show there at the asylum? Is it the guys from Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
I couldn't believe it when I read, like, speed dating? Really? After you're found guilty of killing your wife? That can't be a thing.
No one's responsible. No one's watching what's going on. This man will kill women, and yet they allow him to speed date. It's no surprise that he would like to, now harass the next fellow female.
Yeah, George, I felt similarly when the story first broke that he was engaging in these activities and wished a long-term relationship or was seeking a romantic partner. I can understand the desire, but I'm sorry, perhaps you forfeited that right when you killed your previous romantic partner. Brenda, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I just want to make a comment on Udo Han there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I believe that he should have been charged with murder, period. He was sane enough to turn on the gas, or he frigged with the gas to blow up the house and cover up what he did. So I don't believe that he's as insane as they say they are. And another point I want to make, you take a life, you forfeit your own life.
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from, Brenda, and I think that would be why in Minnesota State, the murder and stalking charge could lead to a death sentence upon conviction. Take a life, lose a life. And I'll be honest with you, for the longest time, I have not been a fan of the death penalty. I just find the differences very stark here. Paul, good afternoon.
I know nobody wants to see the death penalty, but it certainly would solve a few issues here. Do you remember a few years back, a Subway sandwich shop up in Waterloo got shot up by a guy?
Oh, yeah, I remember that. This was the same guy that was in the Eaton Center shootings, right?
No, that was... what was that guy's name? Cousins.
Okay, anyway, Subway restaurant shooting.
And then a murder in, just outside of Toronto there, human trafficking, administering a noxious substance, kidnapping, all these other things. And each time he was out in bail, if you look at the news and you read about these charges, and you always see they list out all the charges, firearms, drugs, whatever, car theft, extortion. And then the last thing always says violating terms of release, because they were out in bail already for something else. It's a whole catch and release mentality of the Liberal government. You got to blame society, not the criminal. That's their attitude. And this is why it's never going to stop, because there is no deterrent under the Canadian, I'm not going to say justice system, because there is no justice under the Canadian legal system. You get arrested in the morning, you're out in the afternoon. All those people released on the drug bust in Brampton, how many of them were actually already on terms for something else? A lot of times, I did see one where it said nobody was on terms for any other release. That only means they hadn't gotten caught prior to that.
Well, perhaps. And I hear where you're coming from with repeat offenders for sure. And Udo Han could be counted among them now. I just think, I don't understand why the system allowed that opportunity to even exist. Guilty of killing one's wife, although not criminally responsible, and then allowed to speed date. Did not make sense to me then. Now he's been arrested again. We'll continue taking calls right after this. It's Talkback on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. 4 minutes away from 1, your update in the 570 News Center, and then Now You Know with Rob Snow taking you through until 3 this afternoon. Let's get right back to our calls on Talkback. Greg, good afternoon.
Hi, Mike. I agree with every thought you have about this latest concept. Like, I'll choose the Minnesota way. In fact, I might ring a bell from different times. I voiced my opinion on this, and they say about, okay, they once had the death penalty here, and okay, well, maybe at that point, life was very different. Okay, so they think, okay, let's get rid of it. And then maybe, yeah, the world was whatever, but it's now basically between 13-year-olds with guns and knives and everything that's happening out there now. It's just turned really almost barbaric again, and therefore, I think it should be reinstated, and bail reform. I keep hearing that term every election, and then that's it. Has anyone reformed anything? I don't think so, because then, you get this, like Paul, the last guy, like everything he said, like, was totally true. Like, what are they doing out again? And then they don't care. They are, it's just that they're playing the game, basically. And, and then, again, whoever made this decision to allow the speed dating, let's get the name. Bring them out in the open. Let's see. Well, what's your reasoning, dude? And here, account for it, for all these questionable things. And then the only other thing I thought, too, one other time we had this topic out, people say, well, life with, no parole and all this. And, well, parole hearings versus death penalty, when it comes to someone like your Bernard or whatever, that, the final answer is for sure. The difference is every so many years, you got to bring the victims' families back up and bring it all up again. Whereas if you could just simply, okay, boom, done, he's gone, no more of this stuff, having to remind him of the horror every X number of years. That's it.
All right, Greg. No, well said. And I can certainly appreciate the passion in that regard. And it does make it tough. You have to wonder, absent consequences, then, and like, I could see, I'm not joking when I said, I told my beloved when this story came, I'm like, how is this even a thing? How do you get to seek a romantic relationship when your previous one ended when you killed her? I honestly can't wrap my head around that. I really can't. Grant, good afternoon.
Yeah, that's kind of a scary thing with that speed dating fella. Many years ago, I would go on this chat line. I got talking with this lady for months and months. She was from London, and I thought, okay, I'm going to drive down there. Knocked on the door. Harry Chester man answered the door. What do you think I did? I didn't really stay around. I hightailed out of there and kept on wondering to myself, what if she answered the door, and what if he was in the closet in the living room? It's scary, and I always thought speed dating was a safe thing to do, but this Yahoo, I don't know. They need to do something, right?
Yes, they do need to do something. Probably not allow somebody convicted of a crime that involved intimate partner violence from, again, pursuing an intimate relationship. It seems to me like that would be reasonable, but I'm just sitting here talking to you, which I enjoy doing every day from 9 until 1. So I've got an idea. Why don't we do it again tomorrow, okay? Cambridge City Council will tonight consider a ban on the sale of fireworks within the city. I think they will ban the sale. We'll talk about that and many, many more things on the show tomorrow when we get back together at 9, okay? My name's Mike Farwell. Bye for now.